I am Chloe, 29 years old. My screen was filled with code I was debugging, while my 1-year-old niece Ava napped in the next room. My phone buzzed. First an email alert, trust fund transfer notification. Then a text from my mother, Susan. Off to Bali, sweetie. We need a fresh start. That $40,000 from Grandma's trust will get us set up. Take care of Maya and Ava. I actually smiled as I looked at my bank security app. Good thing I already moved $30,000 of our money last week, Maya. If you're watching this, you know family can be complicated. But this was a new level. To understand how we got here, you need to understand the setup. We all live in a duplex. My sister Maya, who's in her final year of law school, her 1-year-old daughter Ava, and me, a freelance web developer, live on one side. My parents, Richard and Susan, live on the other. The whole arrangement was built around a $40,000 trust fund our grandmother left. The will was specific for the future and education of Chloe and Maya, but our parents were the guardians of the account. My father, Richard, calls himself a consultant, which basically means he's always between big projects that never actually happen. My mother, Susan, is obsessed with social media. She's almost 60, but spends all day trying to become a lifestyle influencer, posting filtered photos of her lunch. For the past year, Maya and I had been the ones actually paying the mortgage on the duplex. We were the responsible ones. Our parents were the dreamers, and their main complaint, that they had to babysit their own granddaughter Ava for free while Maya was in class and I was working. "We're doing you a favor, Chloe," my dad would say, whenever I asked him to watch Ava so I could join a client call. "This is valuable time we could be using to network." The tension was getting thick. Maya was drowning in student debt, and the money left in that trust was supposed to pay for her bar exam fees and keep her afloat until she got her first paycheck. I was the one who managed the family budget, trying to stretch my freelance income and Maya's part-time library job to cover the gap our parents left. I was the one who listened to their complaints, who fixed the leaky sink on their side of the duplex, who always picked up the pieces. And I was the one who saw this coming. It started about 3 months ago. I began to notice the little things. My mother, Susan, started taking her phone calls on the back porch, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I'd catch fragments as I walked by with Ava. Words like long-term villa rental and visa requirements. My father, Richard, developed a sudden intense interest in international banking. I saw him on his laptop at the kitchen table, reading articles titled "How to Move Your Nest Egg Offshore" and "Retiring in Paradise." They started making excuses to avoid their designated babysitting times. "Richard has a very important networking call, Chloe," my mom would say, even though I could see him practicing his golf swing in the backyard. The final clue was what I found in their bedroom. I was looking for a Band-Aid, and in my mom's nightstand, tucked under a stack of fashion magazines, I found a notebook. On the cover, in her bubbly handwriting, it said, "Bali Vision." It wasn't just a notebook. It was a scrapbook of their escape plan. It was filled with printed-out photos of infinity pools, beachfront bars, and smiling silver-haired couples doing yoga at sunrise. Taped to one page was a printout of a blog post titled "How to Live Like Royalty in Bali" on $2,000 a month. My stomach turned to ice. This wasn't a vacation. This was a relocation. And the only nest egg they had access to was ours. I called my best friend Zoe that night, my voice shaking. "They're going to do it, Zoe. They're going to take our money and leave." "Chloe," she said, her voice firm and cutting through my panic, "you've been their safety net your entire life. What you're describing isn't planning. It's theft. You have to protect Maya." She was right. My sister was working herself to the bone, trying to build a future for her daughter. I couldn't let our parents steal that from her. The next day I went to the bank. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely sign the intake form. I sat down with a bank manager and explained the situation. "I need to understand my options," I said carefully. "My sister and I are beneficiaries of a trust, but our parents are the guardians. My sister needs that money for her law school tuition and bar exam fees, and I'm worried about impulsive financial decisions." The manager understood what I wasn't saying. Because the will was clear the money was, for us, I had the right to act. That afternoon, I opened a new high-security account in my name and Maya's name only. Then I transferred $30,000 from the original trust, leaving exactly $10,000 behind. It was just enough to be a tempting prize, just enough to be the bait. Driving home, I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. I kept asking myself why. Why would they do this? It wasn't just that they were selfish. It was that they were terrified. I realized I was looking at something psychologists call the fresh start fallacy. My parents weren't just running to Bali. They were running from reality. They were running from the fact that they were getting older, that their big projects had all failed, and that they were now facing the unglamorous reality of being grandparents, instead of the lifestyle influencers my mother dreamed of being. They had a terminal case of Peter Pan syndrome, a complete refusal to grow up and accept responsibility. This Bali trip wasn't a plan. It was a fantasy, a desperate final attempt to hit the reset button on their lives, funded by stealing the start button for ours. I knew they would take the bait. I just didn't know how soon. The text message from my mother was still glowing on my phone screen. "Off to Bali, sweetie." The reality of it hit me. My hands were shaking. I immediately called Maya, who was studying at the law library. "Maya, you need to come home, now." She rushed. 20 minutes later, her face pale with panic. "What is it, Chloe? Is Ava okay?" "Ava's fine," I said, my voice quiet. "They're gone. Mom and Dad. They left for Bali. They just texted me." "What?" She whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What about the money?" "They think they took it all," I said, my voice flat. "They withdrew the $10,000 I left in the account." Maya just collapsed onto our worn-out sofa. It wasn't a loud, dramatic sob, but a silent, awful crumbling. "Chloe, that was my bar exam money. That was everything I had saved to live on for the next 6 months while I studied. How am I supposed to?" She trailed off, burying her face in her hands. "They knew that," I told them. I sat next to her, rubbing her back, my own anger, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. "It's okay, Maya. Listen to me. I told you. I saved our money. I saved the $30,000. You're still taking the bar. You're still going to be okay. I promise." "But they did it," she whispered, the tears now streaming through her fingers. "They really just left us." We sat there for a long time in the quiet, stuffy living room, the weight of the abandonment settling over us like a physical thing. After a while, I got up to get us both a glass of water, trying to force my brain into practical mode. "Okay," I said mostly to myself. "Okay, we need to figure out what's next. We need to check the mail, make sure the mortgage." I stopped. I was shuffling through the pile of junk mail on the little entry table, Bill's credit card offers, and one envelope. It was bright fluorescent pink, almost aggressively cheerful. It didn't look like a normal bill. In the corner, in big black stamped letters, it read, "Urgent final notice." It was from a lender I'd never heard of. Homestead Equity Partners. "Who is this?" I murmured, ripping it open. Maya looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "What?" I unfolded the letter. My vision tunneled. The words seemed to jump off the page. "Dear Richard and Susan, Your home equity line of credit, account number, is now 60 days past due. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned down the page past the legal jargon to the numbers. Original loan amount, $50,000. Current amount, due to avoid foreclosure, $50,000. I read the sentence again and again. Foreclosure. Chloe, you look sick. What is it? I held up the paper, my hand shaking so hard it was just a blur. They didn't just take the 10,000 Maya, I said, my voice barely a whisper. They took out a second mortgage. 6 weeks ago. They took $50,000 out against our house. Against the entire duplex. Maya just stared at me, uncomprehending. What? What does that mean? It means, I said, the cold, sharp realization washing over me that the $30,000 I saved isn't our future. It's the only thing standing between us and being homeless. They hadn't just stolen our inheritance. They had stolen our home. Maya and I were sitting at our small kitchen table, the pink foreclosure notice spread out between us like a ticking bomb. We were supposed to be meeting with a lawyer our Aunt Karen had recommended, but we were both just frozen staring at that $50,000 figure. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. It was a long string of digits, starting with an international code. Hello. A polite, accented voice came through the line. Good evening. Am I speaking with Miss Chloe? My name is Mr. Agung. I am the night manager at the Kuta Paradise Resort in Bali, Indonesia. My heart leaped into my throat. I put the phone on speaker. Maya looked up, her eyes wide. Yes, this is Chloe, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Is something wrong? Ah, yes, a small problem, miss, he said, sounding almost apologetic. We have your parents here, Richard and Susan. They are checking in, but the credit card they have provided for the 6-month lease deposit. It has been declined. I closed my eyes. So it begins. I see. They were quite insistent. I call you Mr. Agung, continued. They said there must be a mistake with the bank and that you could resolve the payment. The charges for the first month and the security deposit. It is $10,000. Of course it was, the exact amount I'd left. Before I could answer, I heard a commotion on the other end of the line. Just give me the phone. It was my father's voice, loud and angry. Chloe, he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. What the hell did you do? What did you do to our money? Hello, Dad, I said, my voice as cold as ice. Don't hello, Dad me. We are standing in a hotel lobby being humiliated. Our cards are declined. You stole our money, you ungrateful little... I didn't steal anything. I cut him off, and the calmness in my own voice scared me. I protected my money, and Maya's money, the $30,000 from Grandma's trust that you were never supposed to touch. There was a sharp intake of breath. He was stunned. He hadn't known. I knew the full amount. I heard him sputtering, and then my mother Susan grabbed the phone already in hysterics. Chloe, honey, you have to fix this, she wailed, and I could picture her perfectly, clutching her pearls and trying to look tragic for the hotel manager. They won't let us into our villa, the one I found online. It has an infinity pool. Chloe, I've already planned my first 3 months of content. You're ruining our new life. Your new life, I repeated. The word foreclosure was still burning on the table in front of me. Your new life that you funded by stealing Maya's bar exam money? It's just money, Chloe, she cried. We'd pay it back. You just don't understand. We need this. We signed a 6-month lease on this villa. A 6-month lease, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. That's interesting. Was that before or after you signed the papers for the $50,000 second mortgage on our house? Dead silence. I heard my mother's breath hitch. What? What are you talking about? The pink envelope, Mom. The final notice. From Homestead Equity Partners. You took $50,000 out of this duplex. You stole our home. You abandoned your granddaughter, and now you're calling me crying about an influencer villa? My father grabbed the phone back, his voice no longer booming, but a low, venomous hiss. You were spying on us. You made it easy, I said. You left the evidence right on the kitchen table. You send that money back right now, Chloe. All of it, the $30,000. Or so help me God when I get back. No, I said. What? No. I'm not sending you $30,000. I'm not sending you $10,000 for your deposit. I'm not paying for your 6-month vacation while Maya and I get evicted. I stood up, pacing the kitchen, the adrenaline finally hitting me. Here is what I am going to do. I am going to wire exactly enough money to that hotel to pay for 2 one-way, non-refundable economy class tickets from Bali back home. That is it. You have 24 hours to accept the tickets. Economy, my mother shrieked in the background. You can take the tickets, or you can figure it out yourselves. But the $30,000 is staying here to pay for the $50,000 hole you dug us into. Goodbye. I hung up the phone before they could say another word. Maya was just staring at me, her mouth open. For the first time all day, a small, shaky smile crept onto her face. You really did that. I really did, I said, my hands trembling. The power had shifted. The panic was gone. Now it was just cold, hard resolve. They were coming back, and we would be ready. 3 days later, they were back. They didn't call from the airport. They just showed up dragging their suitcases up the walkway. They looked tired, defeated, and incredibly bitter. The Bali tan they'd been hoping for was just a pale, splotchy red. I had already asked our lawyer to be on standby, and our Aunt Karen had taken Ava to her house for the afternoon. Maya and I were waiting at our kitchen table. My father, Richard, used his key to get into his side of the duplex. A few moments later, there was a furious pounding on the adjoining door. I unlocked it. He and my mother stood there looking at me with a hatred I had never seen before. We need to have a family meeting, my father growled, pushing past me into our living room. My mother, Susan, followed, refusing to make eye contact. Please sit down, I said. My father remained standing, puffing himself up. He was trying to reclaim his power. I don't know what little game you think you're playing, Chloe, he started, but this ends now. Your mother and I have been humiliated. That trip was a misunderstanding. But your behavior, stealing from us, it's unforgivable. I just looked at him. We've made a decision, he announced, crossing his arms. We're selling this duplex. You and Maya have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Maya, who had been silent, just slid the pink final notice envelope across the table. My father glanced at it and scoffed. It's just a clerical error. It's not, Maya said, her voice clear and strong. It was the first time I'd ever heard her use her lawyer voice on him. It's a $50,000 home equity line of credit that you took out 6 weeks ago. It's also mortgage fraud, since you didn't disclose it to the primary mortgage holder. Our lawyer was very interested in that. My father's face went from red to a pale, purplish white. We're not having a family meeting, Dad, I said, standing up. We're here to give you your terms. This isn't a negotiation. I laid out the papers our lawyer had drafted. 1, I said, you are going to sign a quitclaim deed transferring ownership of this entire duplex to me and Maya, effective immediately. 2, In exchange, we will assume the full $50,000 HELOC debt you secretly took out, and we will take over the original mortgage payments. You will be free of the property. 3. Maya continued picking up the next sheet. You will be moving into Aunt Karen's one-bedroom rental apartment. She's already agreed to rent it to you on a month-to-month basis. We'll pay your first month's rent. And 4, I said, my voice flat. The $9,800 you successfully stole from the trust, that's your severance package. You will not receive one more dime from us or from Grandma's trust ever again. And 5, Maya said, her voice catching slightly but finishing strong. Any visitation with your granddaughter Ava will be scheduled in advance. It will be supervised, and it will be entirely at our discretion. My father was speechless. He was opening and closing his mouth, but no sound was coming out. But my mother, she finally looked up, and she began to cry. Not the quiet, heartbroken tears of my sister, but loud, theatrical, gulping sobs. Chloe, how could you? She wailed, tears streaming down her face. How could you do this to us? I'm your mother. How can you throw your own mother out of her home after everything we've done for you? The question just hung in the air. How could I? I looked at Maya, who was watching our mother's performance with cold, dead eyes. I thought about the pink envelope. I thought about Ava sleeping peacefully at Aunt Karen's house, oblivious to the fact that her own grandparents were willing to see her put on the street for a 6-month influencer fantasy. I used to ask myself that, Mom, I said, my voice quiet, cutting through her sobs. How could I ever set a boundary? How could I ever say no? But when I got that pink envelope, the question changed. It wasn't, how could I do this to my mother? It was, how could she do this to her daughter? I looked at her, and all the years of guilt and obligation just vanished. We're taught that family is this unbreakable bond, I said, thinking out loud as much as talking to her, that you have to forgive and keep forgiving just because you share blood. But I realized that real family isn't blood. It's safety. It's trust. It's who you can count on not to steal the roof from over your head. You ask how I can do this. Because I'm protecting my family. Maya is my family. Ava is my family. And you two are just the people who were supposed to protect us, and you failed. People who watch this might think this is a cruel, terrible thing to do to your parents. But they don't know the years of manipulation. They don't know what it's like to realize the people who should love you most are just toxic. Sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is to cut the tie, to stop the poison from spreading. You have to let go of the family you were given to save the family you've built. My mother's sobs hitched. She had no answer. I pointed to the papers. You have 24 hours to sign, or our lawyer files the report for mortgage fraud. The choice is yours. 6 months later, the duplex was quiet. It was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the tense holding your breath silence we used to have, but a genuine peaceful quiet. I was working at my desk, which I'd moved into what used to be my parents' bedroom. The afternoon sun streamed in. From the backyard, I could hear Maya laughing. I looked out the window and saw her playing with Ava, who was now toddling unsteadily across the grass, her hands held high for balance. A new rhythm had settled in. Our rhythm. Maya had used the $30,000 from the trust exactly as Grandma intended. She paid for her bar prep course, passed the exam on her first try, and had just accepted a job offer at a downtown law firm. She was starting next week. The duplex was fully legally ours. We had assumed the $50,000 HELOC and the original mortgage. It was tight, but my freelance business was growing, and with Maya's new salary, we weren't just surviving. We were building. My parents had signed the papers. They had no choice. They were now living in Aunt Karen's tiny one-bedroom apartment across town. We heard from Aunt Karen that my mother's influencer dreams had hit a wall. It was hard to project a life of luxury and Bali dreams when you're living in a cramped apartment with slow internet and secondhand furniture. My father, Richard, was apparently in between projects again. They saw Ava. We had agreed on one supervised visit every Sunday for 2 hours at a public park. At first, they tried to bring extravagant gifts to buy Ava's affection. But we set a boundary. No large gifts, just their time. They would show up my mother with a forced, tight smile, my father looking awkward and impatient. They played with Ava while either I or Maya, or sometimes Aunt Karen, sat on a nearby bench watching. They were polite. We were civil. But the warmth was gone. It was just an arrangement. A sterile, necessary procedure. The betrayal had forced us to become the guardians our parents never were. They were the adults, but we were the ones who had to protect the family. We had to guard the money, the house, and a little girl's future from their childish, destructive impulses. We didn't just save our inheritance. We saved ourselves. Have you ever been in a situation where the people who were supposed to protect you were the very people you needed protection from? It's a terrifying and lonely feeling. It forces you to make impossible choices. If this story resonated with you, you're not alone. So many of us are taught that family is an obligation, no matter how toxic. But sometimes the most powerful act of love is to build a boundary of steel. Sometimes the family you choose, the sister you fight for, the aunt who steps up, the friends who listen, are stronger than the one you were born into. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth is never defined by someone else's inability to see it.